Hi, welcome to the instructional video for week 10. We have a lot to go over this week, so let's dig in. For our language objective for this week, we have uses pronouns properly. So this is another one of those objectives that really cannot so much be taught, especially to our little ones. It has to be modeled. So this is more for you, the parent, to keep in mind as you're talking to your child and to look for opportunities to incorporate pronouns and to maybe, gently guide and correct your child in the use of pronouns. So a pronoun technically is any word that can be used in place of a noun. And there's actually over 100 of them. You do not need to remember 100 pronouns though, don't worry. They fall into a variety of different categories, and I'll give you some examples. There's personal pronouns like I, we, you, he, she, very common ones. There's object pronouns, me, us, you, her, him. Possessive pronouns, mine, ours, yours. Demonstrative pronouns, such, that, these. Relative pronouns, possessive adjectives like my, our, your. Indefinite pronouns, interrogative pronouns, what, whatever, which. Reflexive pronouns, myself, yourself, himself. And if you're a word nerd like me, you even have some very archaic pronouns like thy and thou. So a massive list of pronouns. And once again, you don't have to remember all of these to be working with your child on pronouns. You should really look for opportunities to focus just on personal, object, demonstrative, and possessive adjectives. And that's only about 25 of them. So I'll go back and read off some of those again so we can just get our bearings of what's really important to focus on. I, we, you, he, she, it, they. Those are personal pronouns. Object pronouns, which are me, us, you, her, him, it, and them. The possessive pronouns, mine, ours, yours, hers, his, theirs. And those possessive adjectives, my, our, your, her, his, their. So just with those right there, those are the most commonly used ones. So if you just look for opportunities to use those in conversation with your child, notice times when your child is using them. That's the language objective for this week. And there's one other note on this to draw special attention to, and that is to really focus, if you can, on first person pronouns when you're talking about yourself, like I, me, my, and mine. And the reason that that's so important with little children is that for some reason as parents, it's almost like a natural reflex we have to not use first person pronouns. We tend to insert the noun in there and say something like, mommy's going to the store, or that book is mommy's, instead of saying I'm going to the store, or that book is mine. So I'm not exactly sure why we have this tendency, but it's extremely common. I have often done it myself. And so I encourage you to try, if there's anything in this pronoun objective to focus on, your one most important takeaway, it would be to focus on using those first person pronouns, modeling that for your child so that they get a good understanding and you don't, hear them not able to incorporate first person pronouns, into their school years. So moving on to our cognitive objective for this week, we're introducing a new category, the category of reasoning. So reasoning involves using experiences and information to think through a problem or idea, including repeatedly evaluating the usefulness and accuracy of new information and refining conclusions or problem-solving techniques based on information deemed to be valuable. That sounds incredibly complex, but there's some really simple activities that you can use to work on reasoning objectives. And our objective for this week is strategizing to solve problems. A really critical skill for little kids, one that they will take tremendous benefit from because it's really frustrating to be a little kid. There's so much that they can't do and there's so much that they need to learn, and children have frequently encounter 20 difficulties in their day before breakfast time. And so teaching your children to strategize to solve problems is an enormously beneficial skill for them, especially as they go into a kindergarten environment. So for instance, fixing problems that arose with your marble run that you were working on for a project last week, that's strategizing to solve problems, you know, as you made adjustments to that marble run and fixed it so that it worked properly. That's a really good example of your child using this skill. To be able to do this, they have to think creatively and they have to be able to test possibilities. So they need a little bit of freedom to either physically test solutions to different problems that they're encountering, or think through them and verbally discuss, well, what might happen if we did this, and to think through it mentally. It's really important to offer a lot of encouragement and positive reinforcement and assistance and ideas as your child is working through this objective, so that they don't become discouraged, because just in the very nature of this objective, there's some kind of challenge or some kind of problem for your child to overcome. And so there's the potential for frustration there. So having you there as a support and as a help to them is really critical to them maintaining a positive mindset about overcoming challenges or problems. If something that they try doesn't work, you can reframe that for them as that sort of, quote, mistakes are a part of the process, and that by trying something that doesn't work, they have eliminated one possible solution, and that they are that much closer to the actual solution. And so frame things that don't work, or I hate to even call them mistakes, but frame those things in a positive light for your child, and that they're experimenting kind of like a scientist does. Something doesn't work, well then we know that doesn't work and we'll try something different. So a few activity ideas for this objective. One is to continue with the marble run that you were working with last week, and to you can extend it, you can rearrange it to make it more challenging. You could have your child drop the marble in a different location and help them, you know, experiment with where to make it land in a different spot. Another activity idea is to present your child with an obstacle of your own and to ask for their help with it. Something age appropriate, obviously, like for instance, I have all of these groceries to fit in these 2 grocery bags. Can you help me figure out how to make them fit? Something like that. The other thing you can do is kind of capitalize on natural moments that happen. Like I said, children of this age are constantly encountering little difficulties that they need to overcome. And so when that happens, when they're playing and their block tower falls down, or something happens that they become frustrated and they've encountered a challenge or a problem, use that as a great learning moment to stop and have them walk through a few steps, and to first stop and take a breath and calm down if they're frustrated, to be able to assess the situation, and, you know, tell them that, like, you can't really effectively overcome this if you're really upset or frustrated. So the first thing we do is calm down and help them to do that. Then you identify what the problem is and help them to investigate and see, well, what exactly is the nature of this obstacle? And then you help them brainstorm different solutions to overcome or to get around. Sometimes it's not barreling through the problem, but it's how to get around the problem. So help them to brainstorm ideas of how you can overcome this and get them involved in that process, and then help them test those ideas. Help them learn that, you know, it's not always going to work on the first time. Sometimes you have to test several solutions before you get through an obstacle. And one of the best things to keep in mind is that this age, again, when there's so little and there's so much that they just can't do yet, that teaching them that asking for help from you know, someone else, from an adult, from an older child, is a perfectly acceptable solution for little children. Sometimes that is the best way around an obstacle, or the best way to overcome a problem, is that they simply need a little bit of help. And so by teaching them that that's a good solution, then that's a skill that they again can take on to kindergarten. They can take on to the playground with them. Anywhere that they're at, they understand that if something happens and they've encountered a challenge or a problem and they're frustrated or they're upset, they need to stop, take a break, assess the situation, and that sometimes it is just as simple as asking somebody for help. So moving on to the literacy objectives for this week, we're to the letter J, identifying the upper and lowercase j and telling the main sound of J, which is J. Also the same as the soft sound for the letter G. So when we learned about G, we were focusing on the hard sound, which was G. And it also has the soft sound J, which is the same as the letter J. So I wanted to point out something to you here is that sometimes as you're talking about the letter J, J like jam, right? So that starts with a J. But sometimes your child will come up with examples that do make the J sound, but they start with G. Like they'll say J like giraffe. Well, technically, obviously giraffe starts with a G, but you don't want to necessarily tell your child that that's incorrect, because right then, in that moment, in that activity, they're not focused on letter recognition. They're not looking at the word giraffe and you pointing to the letter and saying, what letter is this? And they answer J. Instead, they're thinking about the sound, J. What says J? And in that example, they have correctly identified the sound of J. It's just made by a different letter in that word. So you want to reinforce that they have done that correctly. Like, yes, giraffe does say J. In that word, you can go on to say in that word, that's actually the G making its soft sound. However, you are correct that that does say J, and reinforce that they have done that correctly. There is a difference between, recognizing the written letter and recognizing the letter sound, and certain letters do make the same sounds. And so when your child does that correctly, even if in that written word that sound is made by a different letter, we do want to reinforce that they correctly identified that correct sound. For math, we're taking a very light week on math, and we're focusing on counting to 80. So we're getting up there in these numbers, and this is a good time to slow down a little bit and take a break from a bunch of other objectives. So you can do a lot of stuff with this time. You can focus just on counting to 80 and make sure your child has mastered that. You can take this opportunity to point out to them the repetitive pattern to numbers. Now they've counted up through enough groups of 10 to be able to really see those patterns, and you can focus on that and just get that mastered and spend a little bit less time on math this week. Just because your child has mastered objectives does not mean that you need to barrel on to new ones. It is good sometimes to just take a little bit of a break and to let what you have already learned sink in. So don't feel the need to fill this time with a bunch of other math activities. You can just focus on counting, and that's perfectly fine. Alternatively, you can use this time to go back and revisit either favorite activities, or to focus on math objectives that you feel like your child needs a little bit more practice with. Either of those is fine. For fine motor skills this week, we have one bilateral hand coordination activity, one in-hand manipulation activity, one hand-eye coordination activity, and one precision activity. For social and emotional learning, under the category of relationship skills, we have demonstrates trusting, caring relationships with one or more adults, and responsible decision-making, accepts beginning responsibilities toward the well-being or comfort of others and the group. So we have some activity ideas for that as well. A lot of things having to do with your child relating to others this week. And for your fun project, we have a 4 seasons activity. So what this is going to incorporate is a lot of vocabulary having to do with science, climate, weather, a great introduction to the 4 seasons, but it's also going to give you an opportunity to use and for your child to encounter a lot of time vocabulary, talking about now, next, soon, then, And that's really going to help with math. All of those are also foundational math skills and incorporating that time vocabulary. So this fun project will let you work in all of that vocabulary and touch on all of those different subjects. And I think that's about it for this week. So have fun with it, and we'll see you back next time.